when you think about something sexual and it's excitatory, does it feel shameful or does it feel kind of like yippee? How does it register in the body? Because if it feels shameful, and especially if it has like a dirty tinge to it, you want to think about, wow, is that tied to my trauma?
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationship Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we are in Sex and Intimacy Month. And we've got a really, really special guest for you today. Somebody who was part of our story, and the work that she's done is part of why we're here probably today to some extent.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting. And I want to start us off just with the review of the week. So drum roll, please. You can do your own internal drum roll in your car if that's where you're listening to this. This week we've got Ashley MH. These episodes break my ... I'm actually really interested in what it breaks. I think it's just Apple cut you off, but here's the review. I love listening to Adi and Sophie cover a breadth and depth of topics while maintaining a constant undercurrent of honesty and humanness. I like that, humanness. The Jaffes managed to create a community of listeners from far and wide, all connected by our desires to stay open and growing. I've listened since the beginning and come back every week to feel inspired, challenged, and a little less alone.
I love that. Thank you for that. Thank you for continuing to come back. And on that note, I want to just say really quick before I give our quote of the week. So yes, if you leave a review, we will pick, if we read it on air, then we will send you a special care package, philosophy superfoods of your choice, and Adi's book, The Abstinence Myth. So don't forget that. Also, we are inching towards 1 million downloads.
We are.
And I would really love for you guys, our community, our family, to just share this podcast today with your social media, with your friends, with your family. Maybe there's a specific episode that you absolutely love and you want to share that. Let's together, we have a few weeks until the new year. Let's together get to 1 million before it hits 2020.
I like it. That's a challenge. We're throwing down a challenge.
We can do this. Our family can do this. Our Ignited family can do this. So 1 million downloads by the eve of New Year's.
By New Year's Eve?
Yeah.
Like midnight New Year's Eve.
Like 11:59.
11:59.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's do this together.
You heard Sophie. Sophie normally gets what she wants, so y'all better show up somehow. I think we're like, I don't know, we got to look at how many. But
it was like 913 or something, wasn't it?
But I think we're like 80,000 or 60,000 away. So
we got this.
We can make it happen,
Share with a few
y'all.
friends. Share the power of social media. We all know that it's powerful. Even if you just have a few followers, sharing that way is really powerful and then can be reshared.
Yeah, and then I think one of the most important things is we've now got over 100 episodes, sharing other episodes that have touched you.
Yeah.
Because,
keep them alive too.
The way we connected to you all at Glow is just like this review from Ashley. You become part of our family. You start really connecting to the way we talk about things and the view and the perspective that we bring to things. And then our guests, right? Just like today's guests. So maybe not just share this episode. Share the other episodes that you've loved with people. Because if all of you listening right now share it with a couple of people, we'll get there.
Yep. We're going to make it happen. I'm excited.
Awesome.
So our quote of the day is about vulnerability. Love comes when manipulation stops. When you think more about the other person than about his or her reactions to you. When you dare to reveal yourself fully. When you dare to be vulnerable. And the Joyce brothers said that. And this is from the Daily Reflections, Mirror of Intimacy. Our guest today runs the Center for Healthy Sex, and she sends out a daily newsletter. And
she does.
Every day is an amazing quote with some exercises and acts that you can do that have to do with the quote. So that's all about vulnerability. And that's the biggest thing, I think, when it comes to healing. Like when people ask, I might get this question multiple times a week. How do you trust again? After someone cheats, how do you trust again? I think this is really one of the key points, is vulnerability, is being able to, like we always say, drop the boxing gloves, but even more, and like lean into your partner when they need a hug and really you just want to punch them or run away. That ability to drop everything and just be like, I'm in this for you and I.
I mean, we went through 45 minutes of that last night.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and I think that's an important thing for you guys to hear. You know, you write me all the time, you write Sophie all the time, but, you know, you have a perfect family and this and that, the other thing. And the reason we share about the struggles and the pain, we want you to know it is a million times improved compared to where it was before. But there's conflict. I was working with my couple last night, one of my couples that I've seen for years, and I tell all couples, like, when you bring in radical transparency, it's not that conflict goes away. It actually shows up faster. You get rid of it faster, and you work through it instead of just rehashing the same stuff. But like we were talking yesterday, you know, some of the things we're talking about happened a decade ago. Some of them happened 5 years ago. There's little tinges and weight and kind of stickiness.
I mean, some of the things that I was talking about are from
15 years ago.
More than that. For my first relationship.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I was 15 years old the first time that my boyfriend cheated on me. Like, I still hold those wounds and I still feel them so strongly, and it sucks because I don't want to be, I'm not that little girl anymore, but it still is like programmed inside my cells, and I still get reactions. When you get mad about something, my gut reaction is to respond the way that little girl would respond, because I'm about to either like be hit or yelled at, or he would be jealous. And it's so ingrained. It was the first 5 years of my sexuality, of having a relationship, of my, not even adulthood. I was 15 to 20.
You thought you were an adult at 15. Don't we all think we know everything at 15?
Sure. Yeah. And it formed, that was my foundation. It was very rocky. And so when I go to a place with you that's conflict, I immediately go back to that person, and it sucks. So I am calling myself out. I really want to do some somatic work and somatic healing. I want to do some EMDR, which, if you want to talk a little more about that, because you do it a little bit, right?
No, I don't do EMDR. I have some friends who train in it. EMDR is eye movement desensitization. The idea is that, so the research on why it works, I don't even know that it's that wide, but it's a very basic sort of technique or tactic. Literally, when it started, was the reason it's called eye movement is literally the therapist would move their finger or move an object back and forth, and you would have to track it with your eyes as they have you work through some things.
Yeah.
It's moved to other versions of that technique. Like now they have these vibrating balls that you'll hold in your hand, and those do it. To my mind, the reason some of it works from my readings is we've got these go and no-go tracks in our neurosystem. And so it's hard for your brain to inhibit, to hold back from doing something while it's active. So I really see this eye movement segment, or having these vibrating balls in your hand, or any of these sort of movements, as something that activates your go task. It's why I love doing walking sessions with clients. Your body is in motion, your brain is in motion. It's hard for it to hold back. You'll talk about things, You'll process things that are difficult to process otherwise, because your brain is working on shutting them down. So that's, to me, one of the reasons it works. It's some people swear by it for trauma. Like all tactics, it doesn't work for everybody, but some people love it. And
that's my next hope.
Within like 5, 6, 7 sessions, they get rid of trauma they've been dealing with for years.
Yeah, I'm just so over it. And like I said last night to you, there's certain behaviors that we both fall into. A trap, they're different. The way I show up is different than the way you show up, but it's based on past traumas and hurt and betrayals that are not present right now.
Yeah.
You and I have a beautiful relationship now. It is open, it is fluid, it is, not open. Let me be clear.
So Sophie just changed our relationship right here on the podcast.
It's not what I meant. It's not open in that way. It is open intellectually, emotionally.
That's funny. People are like, wait, what?
This is that episode? I mean, it is Sexuality Month.
It is Sexuality Month.
But I feel like we're better than we've ever been in the way we communicate, hold space for each other, allow each other to expand and grow. And what are you laughing at?
It's just funny that you're just going on one tangent and it's created there are some people listening right now like, hold on, but I thought,
no,
we're not open.
We're not open. More to come on that, but we're not open. I think that being in this place we are right now, it's just a hindrance to continue to act.
It's just the baggage, right? It's just
in
the baggage
patterning, in old patterning. It's like, why are we
it's
being
like
those
you're showing
people?
up to a flight and you've got all the bags you need for this vacation, but then you're also carrying the bags you had for the last 15 vacations.
Yeah.
And they're like, damn, why are you carrying 45
You just never know.
bags? You're like, I don't know, man. I keep carrying this shit around.
Yeah.
It just keeps showing up with me.
Yeah, I'm over it. I'm over it.
And it's hard to let it go. I mean, it's definitely, some of it is literally in your neurons, right? Like literally in the networks of activation that is partially physical.
Yeah.
And so you see a thing happen and your brain goes, oh, we've been here before. And the last time we were here, we were 17. And it just brings you back to that same place. It's definitely true. We're a work in progress, like every other person, like every other couple. I'm impressed with us. That's why it's funny because, we were having some of the conversation about it's not even a fight is not the right word for it. Some of the conversations about the conflict that we were having last night, we were having with friends in our like WhatsApp text round, which already is growth in my opinion, right? Like 8 years ago, we would have hidden and not talked about it. And we're allowed to inject some humor into it and understand that we're going through something that we wish we weren't, which is different, right? There's a concept in psychology and philosophy to some extent about when you're the observer, you're not the person having the experience. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going through some of that right now where we're watching our patterns. And because we're watching them happen, we're experiencing them viscerally less. Yeah. Like we're not of them, but we're in them. Like we're experiencing it and we're able to say, like the fact that you can say I'm being triggered means you're not fully immersed in the experience. Because people who are just fully being triggered just get triggered. They're not sitting there going, oh, I think I'm experiencing a trigger. They're angry, they're anxious, they're having a panic attack. I think
you and I were like on the cusp, but we just have to, we're seeing our first therapist in
it's been like 3 years.
Yeah.
Literally, since we saw Mark.
Yeah. So we're excited for it. We're doing a 2-hour session drop-in. It's going to be great. It's going to be hard. There could be tears, there could be yelling, and that's what we're inviting in is just realness. She's amazing.
I've never seen this.
We'll let you know if we love her. You guys you ask us all the time about couples therapists, and ours passed away. So yeah, she's awesome. I'm excited for that for us. And I'm excited for this episode for all of you.
It's interesting given this discussion. This episode sort of takes you back. Like I met Alex as we were starting to go through our really crazy period, like 9-10 years ago. So we don't talk about our personal experience, although we did mention during the episode, we might, if you guys are into it, and we'll have you guys vote through stories. If you're into it, we might even do a session with her live with you guys. Yeah. But we saw her literally one of the first days, and then we got assigned Mark as my therapist. But this is full circle, right? Like this is the therapist. And what I love that I didn't know at the time is the books she writes, the work she does, like Erotic Intelligence, etc., is actually about, once you get back to safety, expanding sexuality and sensuality and intimacy instead of what happens a lot of times in the conversation about cheating or sex addiction or any version of friction in relationships where everybody shuts down.
It shuts it down, yeah.
Like, oh, well, can't talk to other people, can't do this, can't do that, can't watch this, can't discuss anything that happened in your past around sex. Like that's where so many people go. They shut everything down. Alex's whole thing is, no, let's pull it back and understand what is this serving, which is really similar to the work that we do with people anyway now. Yeah. So it's a really, really cool discussion.
Definitely let us know if you want a session with us, because if enough of you say we want to listen to a session with you guys, we're going to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And this is an aside that has nothing to do with it, but there's two pieces to this. So first of all, if we hit the million mark
by 11:59 on New Year's Eve,
then any of you that leave reviews that are read before that point, we're gonna throw in some perfect bar
Nice.
treats. Yeah.
Yeah, you tell us what your favorite flavor is or what you want to try, and we'll take it from our personal stash.
Screw that. I'm throwing a bunch of shit in.
Okay, we'll put a bunch in.
We're going to throw the cups in. If you haven't had Perfect Bar cups, you haven't lived yet.
Okay. I'm just saying, I'm going to have to hide that from everyone in this household that you're giving away our personal stash.
I know a couple of people. At Perfect. I think we can make this happen. But these things are ridiculous. I eat too many of them. Yep. So getting them out of the house would probably be a good idea. Some of our friends text us on a regular basis like, are we still out? Why don't you have more? So we're going to do that and some Perfect food bars themselves. And for the rest of you who don't get read, we got you guys a special code. So if you do order from them directly, just type in Ignited. If you don't know how to spell that, then you really need to reconsider what you're doing in this moment.
Check yourself.
But just all caps, Ignited, and you get 15% off.
Awesome. That's great. They also, just saying, I don't know if it's on their website. I haven't even posted about it yet, but they have a new chocolate mint bar that's delicious.
Is that like, does it taste like chocolate chip mint ice cream kind of thing? Or like, is it, describe?
It's like a chocolate bar. It's like a thin mint bar.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
That's
I'll
awesome.
let you try it. We'll try it in a minute.
Okay. We'll try it in a minute. And I'll have to report back because chocolate.
And 1 million downloads.
1 million downloads.
Let's do this.
So y'all, just make this happen.
Let's do this.
We're asking for help.
Just share.
Just be,
share your favorite episode.
Be part of the team.
Yep.
All right. Love you all. See you on the other side.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fixes all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our chat portion. And I really feel, Soph, like we get to explore a lot of things in this sexuality month that we haven't in a long time.
Yeah.
And we talk about sex, we talk about the cheating in our relationship, etc. We always talk about it around the impact on our relationship and everything else that it entailed. We don't often get right into the sex part of it. I think that's what's really interesting about this week. And then bringing somebody like Alex on, because Alex, you are the clinical director and the founder of the Center for Healthy Sex in Los Angeles.
Correct.
And I don't think we've ever said it specifically on this podcast, but the Center for Healthy Sex is where I went to do my therapy initially when we first started dealing with this in the context of sex addiction.
Correct.
Like we had a couples therapist before, and then more things got revealed, and then we dove into Center for Healthy Sex, and that's where Mark, our therapist who ended up passing, that's where we met him.
And we essentially did our own version of an outpatient rehab.
You guys were nice enough to let me modify your intensive 2-week because I couldn't afford it, and we were definitely not at the point where I was going to come to my parents and ask for money. I think my dad had just passed. It was not a very good time in my family at all. So because we couldn't afford that, we created some modified version with you.
Well, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Well, I think Adi just did.
Yeah.
I don't know what more you want me to say about that.
Yeah.
We're going to definitely get into what's different, the way I see what's different about the way you work than a lot of other people, which I didn't know when I joined CHS, but I've learned in the years since. How'd you get to doing this work, though?
Well, I was going to say my work and my conceptualization of this problem has evolved and continues to evolve from when I first started. So I first started working in the field of sex addiction in 1998 because I was extremely interested in human sexuality, but I couldn't find an internship in human sexuality. I mean, they were all like DMH, Department of Mental Health internships, and mostly paper pushing. And I found one internship in this thing called sex addiction. And what I saw, and when I was working there at that time, it was a pretty hardcore medical model of change your thoughts, change your behaviors, and stop it, essentially. And we were getting a lot of people sexually sober or abstinent from their behavior, but nobody knew how to have sex again. And in fact, I was working with a lot of single men that were just terrified to be sexual again, which was no good. And that's where I got the idea to write Erotic Intelligence, which was my first book about how do I think about helping people restore their sexuality to something good and true and beautiful. And how do I think about this problem on a continuum as opposed to it's just aberrant sexual behavior? What about the erotic? What about the celebration of sex and sexuality? And because most people that are sex addicts have been harmed, their sexuality was harmed in some way early on, typically because they were grossly shamed. And then the sex addiction itself is traumatizing and sort of self-abusive, I would say. Yeah. So it's really about restoring a non-shameful sense of self and preferences around pleasure, which we don't talk about that much. Certainly not in the field of sex addiction. We don't talk about pleasure. We talk about how do you stop the destructive sexual behaviors. Yeah.
Totally. And we just did recently an interview for your podcast. And I think this is why I find people who work in sex addiction and people who work in food addictions are the two groups of people who really understand my concepts around stop focusing on quitting the substance or the drug, right? Alcohol, whatever it is you're struggling with, as the way to get help. That's fine. It'll stop the symptoms for a while, but it doesn't get to the root cause of what it is that's happening. And definitely, we talked about this a little bit, but I want to expand about it as we talk about it here. In the context of sex addiction, certainly the attitude for most people is that sex addicts are pedophiles and rapists.
Right.
And that creates...
As opposed to they're your doctor, your neighbor, your best friend, your brother-in-law, your partner, or the guy sitting next to you in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Just people.
Absolutely. And because of that stigma, because of the deep, I think the easiest way to say it is just misunderstanding about who these people are, I see sex addiction as one of the most taboo areas of addiction still to this day. So nobody really wants to talk about it because you're afraid you're going to get lumped in with pedophiles and rapists. And by the way, pedophilia and sexual assault have a whole long list of things that we can talk about where there's probably some destigmatization there to do anyway.
Of course, yeah.
But I know for me, a lot of people I met, it was around porn, infidelity, and both sexual binging and sexual anorexia.
Right.
And I love it, and I'd love for you to expand on it. I don't know that a lot of people, when they come in to talk about, hey, there's a sex addiction going on, anybody says to them, well, what turns you on?
No.
No, that's hardly ever the question. It's almost like you're not allowed to be turned on. I think to some extent I still deal with, we've talked about this before, Soph, but I still deal with things that used to turn me on that I'm not comfortable really bringing up either in our relationship or even in conversation because they're so connected to the trauma I put Sophie through.
Right.
Or like an old version of who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both.
Right. I mean, that's, I think, a problem for people. talked to one of my groups once about using my workbook, Sexual Reflections, which asked the question about what about your sexual acting out did you like? What were the activities that really turn you on? And he said, you know what, I'm not going down that road because my wife is never going to engage in those things with me. And my marriage is more important than that thing. That thing happened to be group sex. So you can see where, all right, well, that's a negotiation. And if you're choosing to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't want to do that, then you give it up. It's like if I said, I have to give up chocolate ice cream the rest of my life, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be that deprived. I might miss it, but I can get over it if my partner breaks out in hives every time I eat it.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm just not going to do it.
Don't you find, Soph, I want you to chime in on this too, because don't you find sometimes, Sophie and I are pretty big envelope pushers. Mm-hmm. So we like pushing boundaries. But don't you find oftentimes that even when he's having this client of yours is having that discussion, part of the reason there's so much pushback and fear from the partner is because of the obfuscation or the denial of those impulses and desires early in the relationship. Like it was never talked about. Sophie and I talk about radical transparency a lot. Right. It was never transparently talked about. And now bringing it up is essentially re-traumatizing the partner because it brings up the pain from the past.
That's correct. And also for this person case, he would say that he didn't want to do it because it was incredibly dissociative for him and reenacted some other trauma from him historically. And he felt like, you know what, I've had a lot of wide and varied sex in my life. I don't need to do that. What's more important for me is this deep connection with my partner, which is something I'm new at. And that's actually the novelty now.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Because Sophie, you and I, over the last, I guess now 9 years or something, have gone through waves of exploring our sexuality and what we want.
Right.
And it's not always easy. It's not always comfortable because there are these things we've been through that cause
stickiness,
pain and stickiness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a constant tapping into, are we not exploring this area of ourselves, our intimacy, our sexuality, because we don't want to be triggered, because of a place we don't want to look at? Like for me personally, I don't want there to be any areas of my life where there's like a cobwebby corner that I refuse to walk into because it's icky and gross and dirty. Like I don't want there to be like, just because I haven't been over there in a while, like that isn't reason enough to not go over there. If anything, it's more reason to want to go clean it out.
Of course.
Make it bright, open the window, do some stripping, spray some, Palo Santo spray, like whatever. Right. Let's clear it out and decide together, well, maybe we just don't like that activity or we don't want to do that sexual thing because we both are aligned in that it doesn't feel good or a turn on. That's totally different than I'm going to shy away from any new fun things together that could possibly trigger us or bring us to a scary place. Like I don't ever want to live my life from a place of fear,
right?
Of what was, because we're not those people anymore. And
that's right. Sure.
I don't think of ideas. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that's about having an adult sexuality, about willing to take oneself on and tolerate anxiety to see what's there. You might say, well, let's try this thing, and you try it and you end up thinking it's the funniest, most ridiculous thing you ever did. And it's like, okay, well, we can mark that off the list. That was really dumb. But we got a lot of laughs out of it. It wasn't particularly sexy, or it was just weird. And okay, next.
I think actually what helped us to break out of, because like Adi said, like we went through the quote sex addiction and we went into a anorexia of like, we weren't having sex. As part of like the prescribed medicine of healing, it was, okay, then be abstinent for a while so you can reset, which totally makes sense. When I'm out of control with eating, I then go on a cleanse, right? It's the same kind of thing of like wiping the slate clean, drinking a liver cleanse smoothie every day for 7 days. And then at the end of that, okay, now I can like reflect on my habits and revisit them. So we did that for a matter of time. And then when we were, quote, allowed to have sex again, and be intimate, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to start. We didn't know, I had just had my first child who's now 9, and I didn't even know like how to behave with him, and he didn't with me. And there were all these, wounds, and there's no one in the bedroom with us, and there's no one really, Mark did the best he could, and he held our hand and would help us, start with holding hands and move from there. But then, if it were up to us and it wasn't our homework, we would just keep it safe, play it safe.
Right.
And then after some time of playing it safe, we realized that's not what we wanted. And what actually felt safe to us was, okay, what if we try new things together that neither of us have ever done before? And that felt fun because then we got to explore together in a new way. And it didn't feel triggering because it wasn't something that he had done with his past partners, which was then triggering.
Right.
It was just something for us. And that helped our relationship grow. And I think that was a big turning point for us, was like, what can we create just for us that neither of us have ever gone through before? And that created a new intimacy and a new playfulness and a new fun, because we were making up the rules. It wasn't based off like past experiences.
Yeah. Well, I can see where that would have been really healing for you, because most partners talk about feeling like they're being compared to an affair partner or a sex worker. And, did you do that with her? And what was she like? And I don't want to do anything with you if you did it with her, as opposed to, oh, what can we do new together that's ours? I really like that idea.
And from there, then it was now, almost a decade later, with lots of work and lots of like, what's the therapy where you keep like introducing the like spider, like the
exposure therapy.
Yeah, like I keep saying, like I feel like I forced exposure therapy over and over again on myself, kind of like a psycho, but also just to like erase the intensity that I felt when I thought of certain things or certain people. Like I kept wanting to talk about it with a D, and honestly, I swear it helped to just continuously talk. And what else about her? And what and what else? And like I really wanted to know, because I love this person, and I wanted to understand the inner workings of what made him tick, what turned him on, what made him feel, like he wanted to behave in certain ways. And then how can we bring a certain energy that we can create that's new together? And so after we created the newness and we had the safety and we were creating new memories together, then I actually did feel safe enough to be like, well, what did you like most with your partners? Like, what did you love to do? And it had been so many years of the trust being built and the fun we were having together that I felt safe enough to like want to go into that world, because again, that's also a corner that you're not looking at. And for me, I don't want, yes, it is safe to not go back there if it's too much. Like you can not have the chocolate ice cream, sure. But also like chocolate ice cream is yummy. Mm-hmm. And like,
can I ask you a question that I can't ever really ask partners? So was there any part of these stories about acting out that turned you on?
I think so, but I think also it was more of just a curiosity.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I have a very like different sexual history where I was with the same partner for 5 years and then I met a D. Whereas he had several sexual partners, and that was fascinating to me and also terrifying.
I see.
He's 8 years older than I am, a lot more life history, was in an environment where he was a drug addict and a drug dealer. So he was around strippers, like just a different, to me, it was like a different universe. I call it the old D, but it was also a part of him. And so there's a part to me that of course is like, we could call it turned on or just very curious. Yeah, like alive.
But that's different. Curiosity is different than sometimes partners upon discovery become hypersexual. Some of that's out of fear. Some of it's if I have sex with him, then he won't leave me. But I often wonder, and this is really an irreverent question, if part of, when we hear stories about, sex that's sordid or, in the dark or something like that, it can be arousing.
Sure.
But it's hard for partners to say, wow, that's really a turn on because I'm so angry at you because you've been lying it to me for 10 years.
First of all, I love the question. Secondly, do you feel sometimes like, again, because talking about sex in any way, honestly, other than the pretty typical kind of puritanical, sex with not no pleasure, but some minimal amount of pleasure for the purpose of procreation is kind of what we look at as our standard, especially in the US, right? That there would be an element. I know I always wonder for you, Sophie, if this actually exists and it's part of the underlying thing because of what you've gone through in your own life, where it's actually hard to know what turns you on. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I say this? Sophie and I talk about this all the time. I'd love we're doing a mini session with Alex. Here you go.
Yeah. Great.
Well, you can't, if someone says to you, what's your favorite food in the world? And you're like, I don't know. I haven't had all the foods in the world. How do I know?
Yeah.
Well, there's something I see when I talk to Sophie about it. We go through this, I don't know, every few years. I grew up on porn. Like
most men today.
Yeah. Like 11 years old on, I was looking at porn. Right. It stopped when I was in my mid 30s, right? Mid to late 30s. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of years of getting almost all of your sexual arousal and information about naked bodies of the opposite sex, and actually in your own sex, in porn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the world that existed. So one of the things that I tell Sophie a lot is the part of the programming, the habitual programming that comes out of that is almost kind of like this scanning of arousal. Like, I don't know how to describe it better than you see something and one of the first judgments is, does that thing turn me on or not?
Sure.
And for me, as it particularly relates to women and, people of the opposite sex. And so sometimes I'll talk to Sophie and I'll ask her, like, we'll be at a place where I think there are a lot of attractive people. I said, do you think anybody here is attractive? Just as a curiosity question.
Sure.
And I think your answer normally, if I remember right, is, well, I don't know, not really. There's some good looking people, but nobody that I think is hot.
Right.
I also wasn't around, the type of sex that you were around. Like, I think comes down to programming. Cause like the only virtual sex that I experienced was like HBO real sex, which is very different than pornography. Very different. It's real sex. Yes, it's on TV, but that was my exposure. Once in a while, I'd like a friend, we would find like a dad's Playboy or whatever, but like nothing that like, was not a lot, it was like once in a while.
Yeah, I do think it's what we're exposed to early on. And I think these arousal templates get set really early on. Yeah. So if you were a different person altogether, if you were a female that was sexually abused from the time you were 5 years old to 11 by, an uncle and a brother, then you're going to have a sexual precociousness just wired into the body where, humiliation and degradation is a turn on. And then maybe you would seek that kind of porn. And then as an adult, you would seek those kind of men that were hurtful. And so it goes. And so that's not even in your brain and your body are not wired in that way at all.
No.
So
and
for you're also a mom.
Yeah.
Right. And so for you're not going to walk into a place and look for a guy to see who's hot.
I think it's different experience. I think it's also a female. I've been the one pounced on and
of course,
fawned on since I was 11. So it's the opposite where I turn in and recluse and think I don't like, I want to not hide, but just like, let me turn off. Let me shut
energetically
down.
Disappear. Right.
I want to shut down sexual energy. I'm not going to elicit it because that is the opposite of what I want to attract.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas you're the opposite, where you are the pouncer. You're the man. You're the dominant. You're the.
I mean, a very passive pouncing, given the fact that for 20 years it was like from porn, but yes, like psychologically.
Psychologically, not literally. You weren't pouncing people. I'm saying
there are people who have.
Yeah.
But some of that is also, biologically encoded, what you're talking about now. And we're talking about strict gender differences in strictly heterosexual people on those ends of the continuum. Yeah. I think that male, what you're calling pouncing, is a biological directive.
For sure. And I think that's also why if I'm in a room of people and you were to say who is attractive to you, I would name females before males because it feels safer. Safer. I'm like, they're not going to energetically put their sexuality and all that, that hormonal stuff all over me. Whereas a woman is much more gentle and easier to approach.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Your first book, Erotic Intelligence, how, given the fact that we have these templates that have been created since long before anybody read your book, and on top of that, we have these biological archetypes or these biological blueprints that, again, they get varied through epigenetics and experience. Like it's a much more complex thing than just in your genes, pun intended and all. But so when you teach people, because it's such a nuanced thing, right? To say to somebody who's struggling with an intimacy disorder related to their sexual acting out, overacting out, underacting out, inappropriate acting out, doesn't really matter. How do you educate them? Because when I hear erotic intelligence, the idea is to allow a person that when they get asked the question, what turns you on? What do you like? What gives you that sense that you're looking for? Do you have any quick sort of insights that the people listening right now can actually use so that when they listen to this episode right now, they can literally go home today and go, oh my God, I've never thought about these things. Let me give it some thought.
Boy, I'm sort of lost in the question, T. Are you saying how do people know what turns them on?
Yeah, especially people who've either never asked that question or have so much shame around their sexuality.
Right.
That sometimes the things that turn them on are also the things that they're running away from.
Well, I think that is that is a sophisticated question with an answer that's not easy. But the way that I think about it with people is to ask them to track what they're feeling in their body. Because shame is wired into the enteric nervous system, meaning it's in the gut, right? So when you feel red hot shame, it's a bodily based visceral experience. It's not guilt, which is a left brain thought. So when you think about something sexual and it's excitatory, does it feel shameful or does it feel kind of like yippee? How does it register in the body? Because if it feels shameful, and especially if it has like a dirty tinge to it, you want to think about, wow, is that tied to my trauma? That I had a father that was so critical and just relentlessly critical that I seek humiliating and degrading experiences, not because I am intentionally seeking a BDSM community, which is a different kind of choice, but because I can't do it any other way. I'm probably reenacting something that leaves me afterwards not feeling so good about myself. In fact, I feel like I'm broken or defective or dirty in some way. So that would be a no. That would be a problem that you want to go unwind somewhere in therapy. But if it feels arousing, like it's exciting, and you feel it sort of genitally exciting, but it also feels like there's an openness in your chest, and maybe it does feel a little naughty or dirty, then that's a green light, most likely. Because sex has an animalistic quality to it. The trap people in recovery get into sometimes is they say, well, the purpose of sex now is about being connected and making love and contacting the divine, and all of that's spectacular. But what about the animalistic, sweaty heat that also goes with sex? It's not about distilling those things out and one is better than the other. It's about an integration of all of that in a way that feels like, again, it's life affirming. And even if it's not super life affirming in the end, it leaves you afterwards with questions or curiosity, or something doesn't feel quite right. Then it's a portal to exploring what is that thing that doesn't feel quite right.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind as I'm hearing you saying this is like, I talk with a lot of my clients around addiction about fun and recreation, and they mostly have none. Like most people that come to me with
the addiction is right.
Yeah, well, it's replaced a lot of those things. And so they're like, well, I don't have fun. And I go, when was the last time you laughed so hard your belly hurt and your jaw
hurt?
So, like a comedy show laugh. Or I'm thinking about my kids, running around trying to catch each other and you're like falling over, and sometimes you scratch yourself a little bit, but you're having a blast. There is no intimacy building in that. There's no contacting the divine. There's none of that, except for the fact that having fun creates enjoyment in your life, and creating enjoyment becomes part of,
But play
part of the
is
fabric of your life.
Dopaminergic, right? It's high dopamine, and we learn through play. And sex should be playful and fun, and all those things. It's not just one note. And I think in sex addiction, the sex can be very rigid because it's all about getting off. And people are seeking, like the more intense orgasm, oftentimes through the same thing over and over again. As opposed to sex can be, passionate and super sweaty and animalistic, and really, laughter and fun and tears and the whole spectrum of the rainbow when you're really integrated and in your body, and I think feel safe. I think for women especially, that safety is crucial, because I think women will do pretty much anything their partners want them to do if they feel safe.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't even be like what their partner wants them to do. It should be, what do we want to do to elevate? And yes, I mean, there's different ideas from each party, but like being safe enough to express what it is, they're desiring or fantasizing about, or thing they've been thinking about they want to try.
Yeah.
Feeling safe it's
everything. Right. Because when you feel safe, then you trust, and then you can play. That's just how the human organism is. If we don't feel safe, if the social engagement system is offline and we're in danger, because there's a predator chasing you or you're in an earthquake, you're not going to be laughing and playing.
Yeah.
There's no play on board. It's just danger.
Yeah.
Do you get pushback when people are coming to you in these, because I know, because we were in the state of, let's be honest, most of the time it's men who are coming in and acting out. Not always, but the majority as it stands right now. And then, the women, the partner is looking at, in this case it was me, like, this guy's got a problem. He's constantly lying. He's been lying to me for years. He's crazy. He's insane. He's doing things that are risking me, my kids, our life together. I mean, it's an incredibly heated and touchy,
painful,
and incredibly painful. And you talked about trust, and this is kind of like long-term, the basis of our life together and separately forever kind of level of trust, right? Not just, I don't trust what you're saying to me, but I don't trust that I'm safe. This thing. Disease, pregnancies, all this stuff, right?
All of it.
And so when people come in that state, and I know Sophie was in that place, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sophie, but there was no allowance for like, well, what turns my partner on? And
no, well, you're in the wrong stage of recovery process.
Right, we were in recovery.
That's what I wanted to hear about.
We were in the healing stage,
Yeah, I think when you're in the discovery phase, for partners especially, people are in an acute trauma state, or some have PTSD. And, the two of you have a relatively new marriage. When people come in, they've been married for 20, 25 years, 40 years, and their partner's been cheating for the duration of a 40-year marriage. Yeah. That's devastation that I don't know how people come back from. Same. I mean, it takes a long, long time.
Yeah.
First of all, to go through just the magnitude of the discovery and the heaps of secrets and lies, and then do I dismantle a 25-year marriage with children or grandchildren sometimes, or do I stay? I mean, these are massively difficult decisions that people have to make. So there's no room for talk about positive sexuality or pleasure. It would just be really inappropriate at that moment.
Yeah, survival.
These are second and third stage recovery conversations.
Yeah, perfect. I just wanted to understand kind of where this fits in. Yeah. By the way, I just have to say this now, having been in this world for 10 years or so, we also know couples who've had exactly those sorts of stories, 30 years of marriage, 20 years of cheating.
Yeah.
Deep, deep lies and deceit and obfuscation and all the stuff, who've made it to the other side.
And,
oh yeah. And when they do, it's awesome.
Oh, it's a beautiful,
right?
Beautiful thing to watch.
It is beautiful. I mean, people have told me, their marriages are better than they ever would have been had this not happened, because it forced people to get brutally honest with each other. And that builds intimacy, which is something that it's hard for people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also giving it the proper time, like there's two things that I'm hearing here. One is that anything's possible.
Right.
That love not only can be experienced again, but in a whole new, refreshing, beautiful new phase. And also that healing needs to be given the proper time, energy, space, and the safe space to process it all. Like and there is no prescribed perfect time.
That's right. And you can't rush it, and everybody's different.
Yeah, I kept saying, and we were, again, like you said, we were at the infancy of our marriage, but I kept, year after year being like, I'm over it. I'm fine. I'm healed. Okay, I get it. I trust you. And like, for the most part, I think I did.
And I sit there going, it doesn't really feel like you trust me yet.
Right.
Yeah. And it just took time. It took waves. And, we were talking about earlier on last week's podcast, we were talking about our son who's 7. He had broke his forehead open when he was 2. And there's still, a white scar.
Oh, sure.
Like,
yeah.
It's still there. And like sometimes, he'll press it and be like, ow. But it doesn't run his life, and it's not gushing blood. And 99% of the days he doesn't even think about it.
Sure.
But it's still there.
Right.
I still remember it well, but I don't define my days by like checking his phone and wondering who he's talking to on the side, or because it's not even around. It's not even an issue. But when we put ourselves in certain situations that are especially challenging on purpose to challenge our growth edge,
right.
Sometimes I notice, okay, there's some stickiness there, or I'm feeling those old feelings. Interesting. Let me lean into those instead of running away.
Right. And those are also, deeply embedded patterns. I mean, those are in the autonomic nervous system. They're also laid down in the right amygdala. These are not cognitive thoughts.
Right.
These are visceral reactions in the organism that are warning signals to you, like proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I really think that the partners are the ones who put it all on the line in these marriages, because it's one thing to be fooled once. It's another thing to be fooled twice.
Yeah.
And betrayal, I don't know what anybody says, but if I had a choice between being caught or being betrayed, I would take being caught. Because if I'm doing something, if I'm cheating or lying or stealing, I know that I'm doing it. But when you're being betrayed, you have no idea it's going on.
And it's interesting because there's different layers and levels of it. And everyone's experiences, I'm sure, are different. But the thing about addiction, specifically sex addiction, because it's what we experienced, is that it's almost like the lies were the harder thing for me to recover from. Like,
always.
Years of lying, like multiple, I'd find years later, like, wait, did you kiss her? And he's like, yeah, I told you. I'm like, you never mentioned her. Oh, I thought I did. Like,
right.
And just, thinking the world was one way and our reality was one way,
right.
Planning a wedding, just like all the things. And then the whole world would come crashing down. And that happened multiple times for me. So,
right.
My like system just learned that like I can't trust anymore.
Right. And that story, your story that you just told in a nutshell, is universal to every partner I've ever talked to. And I hear women say all the time, I don't really care about sex workers. It's the lying that I cannot abide. Most women today know about porn and going for a hand job, and they're not prudes. They get what's going on. It's really the lying that's so disturbing because you don't know what your reality is. You can't bank on anything.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, our listeners know, but I've been on both sides. We've both been on both sides. And so Sophie, the cheating, Sophie didn't lie. So there wasn't that piece to it, but you're right. I can wake up. Sophie can have feelings about my cheating episode and the lying. And then my job is to kind of stand there and be understanding for the reactions that she's having, knowing
as you said, it's a visceral, autonomic thing. I can't change it right now.
Right.
I just need to be there and hold her and accept kind of like the consequences of what I've done.
Exactly.
But on the flip side, sometimes I'll wake up. It still happens much more rarely now, but sometimes I'll wake up with dreams or post-traumatic thoughts about her cheating episode, and there I have no control.
Right.
Right. And it is interesting. I'm not recommending this for couples listening, but it is interesting being on both sides, because it gives you insight to say, oh my God, this is what I put you through, but I didn't only put you through it. By the time I told you, there had been months, and there were all those times where I lied, and there's all this stuff. So by the time you found out, you're kind of questioning everything that came in between. And for Sophie, it was years of waking up going, what the fuck is up? What's down? I have no idea. Are you really with me here? Are you still doing all this stuff behind my back? And I don't know now.
Sure, because there's no way to know or tell. It's not like there are bottles all over the house or crack pipe, right? Yeah. That's the other thing about sex addiction. It's quiet. It's invisible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we have to wrap up in a second, but if you drop all of what is good and what is bad and the judgment and our society and the way that we look at things, just to have a really raw conversation right now, I truly, like, to the depths of my soul, believe that after the years of what we went through, and then when I cheated on a D, I swear it feels like it rebalanced something. And I think it's a personal thing. I don't think
it probably did. Sure.
Yeah.
No, I think for you and for some women, it feels like a reclamation of agency.
Yeah.
Like I said, when you're betrayed, something is going on. It's out of your control. So that's a way to take back a piece of yourself or some control 100%. And restore parity. And to your credit, you said, hi, I'm going to go do this, is what it sounds like.
Well, I did it.
No,
and
she
then
said I just did this.
Oh, you did?
5 seconds later, I said, hi, I just did this.
Okay.
But there was also another element that, again, it rebalanced. And again, this is not a recommendation for anybody who's cheated on to go cheat.
This is our story.
It's our story.
Yeah.
But there was another piece, and that was Sophie always looked down at me for having slept with women that I just met, or, strippers that I knew but wasn't in committed relationships with, etc. And kind of that number comparison was always a really big thing. And so having had essentially a one-night stand experience and getting me back in the cheating did more than just rebalance, because she cheated on me, but also
it gave me a deep understanding of, like, oh, you can have sex with someone you don't love.
Right.
Like, I literally want nothing to do with him for the rest of my life and have not had a thought about him since.
Right.
We're in conflict. Wow, you weren't lying. And then actually restored a little bit of trust in that he said, like, nope, don't think about her. And I'm like, how can you not? You had sex with her. It's the most
right.
you could ever do. And it's like, it's a deeper, like I was saying with how I want to talk, like, at length about certain things, because I want to understand. This was a deep, like, visceral understanding.
That's great. Because a lot of women will say, they think that also, how can you say that this person, you had sex with them off and on for 10 years and they don't mean anything to you? And the guy's like, no, they didn't actually.
Yeah.
It's funny because when that happened, we're in a couples group. And when that happens, definitely a few of the women were like, good for you, girl.
Right.
Damn.
But I also get it, right? Like I mean, it was traumatic for us. It caused a lot of pain. But again, it rebalanced that very delicate understanding of pain from both sides. So
sure,
it's really interesting. And again, like I said before, Sophie and I are not ones to shy away from testing the boundaries of what we're doing, which sometimes leads to really amazing growth and sometimes leads to really incredible challenges.
I have to say, even in a personal level, that experience allowed me to come down. Like I had a friend who was there that night that I had cheated, and people put you on pedestals. They have expectations of who you are and who you are to our community and our friendship and how I look at you, and you're a mother and you're perfect. And it was fucking great. I have to say, like, I'm not perfect. I never said I was. You put me up there.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm allowed to also make mistakes, and I'm allowed to also have one night stands, and I'm allowed to have marital issues. Even if I'm a mom, I'm allowed to make mistakes. And
Probably less one night stands while we're married.
Yeah, I mean,
Like less of them.
I may ask beforehand next time.
Right.
A few hours before would have been helpful, but it's a learning experience. And again, I'm grateful, just as I'm grateful for all the experiences we went through with Adi, hiding, cheating, all of that. Like, yes, it was so brutally painful and heartbreaking, but it made us who we are today.
Absolutely.
Well, I love what both of you are saying, because it's easy to look at the two of you and say you have the perfect life. Right? You've got a perfect marriage and you've got a beautiful family and you're perfect. And it seems like the two of you are actively bashing that construct because no one has that.
No,
everyone thinks they married the wrong person. Everyone thinks they've got the wrong kid.
Grass is always greener.
That's right. Yeah.
One of my favorite comments that readers have is, I'm struggling with the same things you guys were struggling with because you've shared them and have told me that it's okay and you can make it to the other side. I feel safer.
Yeah.
A little bit of hope.
Exactly.
The most terrible thing, and we all experience this, and we can get to our 5 questions after this, but one of the weirdest things that happen in so many, and everybody listening right now has had this happen with at least one couple, and it may have been your parents. You see a couple that everybody thinks are doing great. Amazing. You just went to dinner with them last month. They're great. Your kids just playing on the playground. And then they tell everybody they're getting divorced.
Right. Yeah.
And that is like a sword to your heart. You're like, wait, what happened?
Yeah. How could that be?
I mean, they seemed like they were so happy and perfect. And the reason is because we just don't talk about what's actually happening. We just don't.
Exactly.
We hide it all.
Right.
And you get to see a lot of that.
Oh, sure.
Well, we could keep talking forever. And I think we might need to book a few sessions with you.
Okay.
But we always ask our guests 5 questions, and our listeners love this and we love it too. So what is the best advice that you've ever received?
Oh my gosh. I think I just drew a complete blank.
And the first thing that comes to mind, it can be like, something, there's a million things that could come up for these answers, and just like something that, comes to mind.
Yeah. And you can take a second to think. We can edit that out. That's not a problem.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to have to think about this for a long time, because I was like, has anybody ever given me advice? I'm sure they have. Oh, okay. I know. I had a teacher once who said, don't ever let anyone think you're having the best sex in the room, as a sex expert.
Oh, I love that.
And I thought that was really wise, because it's sort of what you guys are saying, that people can project on me that, I have this sort of perfect sex life and I know everything about sex and sexuality, and it's not true.
It's about keeping your ego in check.
Yeah, for sure.
Keeping your ego in check and knowing that you can fall at any moment.
Yeah, I'm not a guru, I'm a teacher.
Exactly, right. And I'm perfectly imperfect like everyone else.
Love that.
What has been your proudest moment to date?
Oh boy, I think I've had a lot of those moments. I think, completing some of the books that I've written definitely is a source of pride. I recently won the 2018 Leadership Award from ITAP, which is the organization that certifies sex addiction therapists, and that was a great source of pride. And probably raising, in part, my nephew, who's now 23 years old and at American University, and watching him sort of flourish and be sexually secure as a result of spending like 15 to 19 in my house.
Wow.
Where we talked about sex over dinner, and we just talked about sex all the time. And so he seems to be, sexually not hung up. And so that's a great source of pride.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Yeah. For somebody his age, that's incredible. To flip that, what has been your hardest or one of your hardest moments?
Well, probably writing my last book, Sex Addiction as Affect Dysregulation, was really an incredibly steep hill for me, because I'm not a researcher or a neuroscientist. And there were times when I felt like I just wanted to jump off the roof of my house, like I wasn't going to be able to get it finished. And likewise with building CHS.
Yeah.
It's like having a vision for something and really charging up a hill, and realizing, wow, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. and learning to pace myself over time and seeing something through is extraordinarily gratifying. But man, can it be painful and wearing along the way.
As somebody who's owned an outpatient treatment center, I know the pain you speak of.
Right, yes.
And so congrats for your continued success. The work that we do as healers, as people who help others, can be really taxing. And that's very common for a lot of the people that we talk to, because a lot of people we talk to serve. That means you have to take care of yourself in specific ways. What are your self-care routines that make sure that you show up as the best version of yourself, regardless of what's going on, to do the work you do?
Well, I'm super disciplined about my physical health and well-being. So exercise and eating well, like eating in the ways that most support my physiology, getting sleep, and spending lots of time with people that I love so that I'm not isolated, where I can laugh and play, and also just taking time off, going and visiting different places and changing the channel.
That's awesome.
Love that. Last but not least, this podcast is called Ignited. What ignites you?
Well, I think this constant exploration and this question about what creates a long-term healthy sexual relationship over time. That was my original question. And so it is a bit of a quest. And I certainly use my own relationship as a petri dish for that. But that is an endless curiosity, especially because we live in a time now where, as we talked about, pornography is forming and fashioning the way we have sex now. People are having less sex than ever before. There are cultures that are having less sex, like the Japanese, that are more into solo sex. And so it's very difficult to keep up with that question because of the shifting tides and mores and, different forces that are upon us today.
Wow. I love it. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was really lovely to visit with the two of you.
You too.
Yeah, really. Thank you. And
we really appreciate this. Yeah.
We literally will probably reach out.
No, but I was just thinking that.
To do some sessions. But
or have wine.
Or we can just do it. We can do it on camera like this.
Yeah.
I love it.
People would love that. Okay.
I know, right?
If you're listening right now and you want us to have some sessions live.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Let us know.
Okay.
All right.
And if there's more than like 20 of you, we'll take it deeply into consideration.
Okay.
I love the work that you do. I didn't, to be honest, again, like I said before, when I was at CHS, I wasn't even that aware of it because I didn't really see you. Primarily, I saw under you. But given the work that I do and how much you challenge the status quo in my field, I applaud and appreciate the work that you do to release the things that are actually creating the symptoms you end up seeing instead of only treating the symptoms.
For sure. Right.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know you guys loved it. Please share with us what resonated, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
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 Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.